Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Monday the 19th of March. Joining me in this edition, Steve Withers.
You're squeezing me too tight.
Mark Hodgkinson.
It's just an old toy. We never find anything good.
And Ed Selley.
Where is my goddamn shoe?
Welcome back to the podcast. It's a Friday while we record this, and it's been a pretty terrible week, really, because we've lost two major stars of theoretical physics, Mr. Stephen Hawking and Mr. Jim Bowen. Both of them sadly passed away. And I guess we were mentioning Jim Bowen, we've got to mention Ken Dodd as well, who passed on at the... was he 90?
He was 90.
90, yeah.
So
Let's be honest,
good
I
innings.
already thought both of those people were already dead, if I'm being honest. Jim Bowen and Ken Dodd.
Well, I mean, Jim will be best known for his catchphrases and, of course, Bullseye on a Sunday, which was an institution back in the late 80s, early 90s. In fact, was it not early 80s? Because I seem to remember it on a Sunday night. It was family. It was required viewing, basically, up north anyway, Mark. It was.
Yeah, we watched it. We all sat down as a family and watched that. It was a Sunday afternoon, wasn't it? Like tea time-ish or something like that.
Yeah.
I have never watched an episode of Bullseye, but
You are missing out.
I did learn something absolutely fascinating, which Mr. Bowen achieved, which neither Mr. Hawking, Professor Hawking, or Mr. Dodd did, which is that an episode of Bullseye was used to help catch a serial killer. And I'm not making any of that sense up.
That's true, isn't it? Yes.
And, you know, who of us can say that?
Okay, well, you kind of just leave us with that. You're going to have to fill in the details, because I've never heard this.
Basically, there was a bloke who, very unpleasant man, shot two people in Pembrokeshire on the Pembroke Way, and essentially it was a cold case, and the investigating officer realised that he'd been on an episode of Bullseye as a contestant literally no more than a couple of weeks before this murder had happened in 1989. So he was able to secure the tape, and basically not only did in the video clip did he look exactly like the artist's impression of the assailant, I mean just uncannily the case, but it just showed a level of really unsettling body language when actually viewed by professionals, and it was used as partial evidence in court and secured a conviction. So there you are.
So there you go. So yes, Stephen Hawking. There's not many people like him come along very often. So I think it's right, the level of tribute that is coming in for him. I've yet to see the film about his life, but a fascinating life, Steve. And not only was he an absolute genius when it came to physics, but the fact that he had to deal with the disabilities that he had and dealt with them in such a way that it never once sort of sidetracked his ambitions as to what he wanted to do. Well,
not only that, he was a relentless practical joker. I was sort of dimly aware of this, but Twitter was just full of just him anecdotes, because he appeared on Newsnight about 10 or 11 years ago, and because of the nature of him being in the chair, he was essentially put in situ off camera ahead of the show starting, and they lined him up behind the table, so on and so forth, and then they switched from sort of studio normal lighting to the actual broadcast lighting, and they were just flicking switches off, and the producer flicks one of the switches and Stephen Hawking just leans forward in his chair and just stops moving, and the producer goes, oh my god, sort of like flies off to secure the assistance of any and all people, and obviously then comes back to find Hawking laughing his arse off and, you know, just generally taking the piss. Yeah. And that he also held a party in 2009 with champagne, hors d'oeuvres, all the rest of it, but he only sent the invites out the day after the party as a test to see if any time travellers would turn up.
That was like, Steve, you really sound like Ed did.
Oh, well, meh.
Actually, sometimes Ed and I do sound quite similar.
We're going to hear enough Withers, aren't we, anyway?
Yeah, no, go for it, lads. I noticed that the film, by the way, The Theory of Everything, it kind of, you know, it's about a relationship with him and his wife, who he divorced. So, ran off with his nurse, didn't he? Well, not ran off, obviously. Yeah, which is obviously the film kind of slightly glossed over. Yes, but obviously a genius. Have you read A Brief History of Time? Well, I have. Has anybody else read A Brief History of Time?
My wife has. I mean, I am such an appalling mathematician. I mean, to the point where I am genuinely remedial in terms of numbers, that I figured it would just be like trying to explain a tomato to a blind man, and have just left it be. But who knows? I'll put it on my very long to-do list.
he actually only uses one equation in the entire book, which is obviously E equals MC squared. So mathematically, he wrote the book clearly for a mass audience. So it does try and be as simple as possible, whilst still discussing staggeringly complex subjects. But it's a very entertaining read, and obviously makes you realise just how vast and unknowable the universe is. And we're just scratching the surface, really.
And on that bombshell,
back to Bullseye.
Come on.
Yeah,
know your level.
I'll tell you what, I know more about Bullseye than I do about the brief history.
I mean, the question that was doing the rounds, with regards to Jim Bowen on Twitter, was no one seemed to have that. No one came forward. It was asking, does anyone still have their Bullseye speedboat, or is in possession of a Bullseye speedboat?
I think most of the people on it lived on council estates, and what use they had for speedboats, I'm not really that sure.
Well, didn't the story go that essentially the way it was set up is that the car was not an actual prize? It went back to the dealers every evening.
Oh no, I've seen people win a mini metro before now.
Ooh. I always thought that it basically, if it was you haven't won, here's what you could have won, show them the car.
I think there was a bit of that.
Here's what you've actually won: speedboat from a bankrupt stock thing. Which I thought was certainly how the urban legend went.
Yeah, I mean, the thing was, though, and it's been picked up in some of the tributes, is the fact that it was the way he dealt with the people that came on, because the people that were on that show, and vast majority of them were unemployed at the time, or unemployable at the time, but there was no airs and graces about Bowen and the way that he dealt with them on that programme, and he made everybody feel welcome and all the rest of it. I mean, it's been decades. It was the original run when I last saw Bullseye. I've never bothered looking at what I know. They run on some channel somewhere on Freeview, I'm sure. But I've never seen them since it went out. But that still sticks in my mind, was the way he was such an affable person that he made everybody feel welcome and part of what was going on, and there was no airs and graces about the guy, which is.
He seemed like a really nice bloke. He was a deputy head teacher, wasn't he, before he became a comic?
That's good training for dealing with an audience. Yeah. Also, didn't he run a pub afterwards as well? So.
Yeah, but the thing was, it was after seeing 2 live performances by Ken Dodd that he decided that he wanted to be a comedian.
Oh, really?
Really? Because I always thought Ken Dodd was, let's be honest, a bit shit.
Oh no!
Oh, you're wrong. He's funny.
He's very much of his time, and a lot of it. It's just desperately 70s, early 80s, but timing and the innate understanding of what makes language funny, he was properly good.
Agreed.
And the thing was, if you didn't like the first 2 jokes, just stick with it, because he's gonna hit you at some point with stuff that is funny. He was just so quick and so varied with what he was saying.
Was that a Diddy Man?
Yeah, that's him.
Yeah. I was just to confuse him with Michael Benteen with his potty time. I think both of them involved little invisible things.
No, the Diddy Men were real, weren't they?
You mean they were real?
They weren't a real thing. They weren't a tribe or anything, but they were small people on stage. They were actual people, weren't they?
Were they?
I thought they were puppets.
I thought they were puppets.
I
think
we are getting
this
confused. I'm going to have to Google Diddy Men.
Anyway.
Oh no, they weren't. They were puppets. Sorry. That's my memory.
That's your childhood.
What the hell were you watching, little people?
And in other news,
Charlie and the Chocolate
weren't
Factory.
real either.
Every now and again we have a podcast which is absolutely on point. I'm sensing, I'm just getting this weird feeling in my bones that this isn't going to be one of them.
It's probably a good thing, because the last few have been very on message.
This is true. Can I just say, I also had something brilliant happen outside earlier on. I was wondering if it was going to last until the podcast started. But the Jehovah's Witnesses arrived to do their stand. They are real here, to do their canvassing. But some other church, I'll use the word church, I'm feeling kind, also turned up to do some door knocking. And they had an argument in the street over who should be there. And I felt like coming out to them saying, look, I don't want either of you. Could you just fuck off? But no, they were really quite het up about it. So
about whose makeup...
whose invisible sky person was the message that needed to be delivered. So, yeah, that was one of the more surreal things.
Yeah, the thing is, Ed, you sit around all day waiting for couriers and they never turn up.
Well, no, actually, no. I'm going to go... My couriers are generally pretty damn good, especially now that most sane organisations have stopped using Parcelforce. If you are an employee of Parcelforce, I apologise, but my experiences with you have not been great. And no organisation for courier, for review stuff, uses Yodel, and CityLink is no longer with us. So, I mean, the ones that we've got left they're all right, actually, here.
Actually, that reminds me. 2 weeks ago, we were talking about couriers, and I think Phil mentioned that his CityLink driver used to ring him up to ask him if he was in before he came round. And I said, my UPS driver still does that. Last week, just after the podcast had finished recording, he turned up to collect XTZ speakers from me. And he said to me, do you know a guy called so-and-so? And I said, no. He goes, were you talking about me on a podcast last week? And I went, yes, I was. I was saying how great you were. And you ring me up to go, because, yeah, I know, I heard about it. How did the person... How did that work? That means that someone had to know who I was and who my UPS driver was.
Have you turned your webcam off, Steve?
I know, yeah. It was staggering. So obviously either we've got a much wider audience than we realise, or the world's a very small place.
I think it's more like the small place. Yeah.
Heady combination of both.
But he was very, very happy to have got mentioned in the podcast. I didn't even mention him by name, so that was some serious... I mean, I think Sherlock Holmes might be one of our listeners. I think it may be the case.
Oh, I think he's dead or fictional. One or the other.
The latter.
But yes, as I say,
yes.
So we had an argument over God earlier, which was good. So yeah.
Okay, Mark, do you want to do competitions?
Okay. In one, we've got Daddy's Home 2 on Blu-ray, and that closes on the 21st of March. In 2, we've got Only the Brave on Blu-ray, also closes 21st of March, and Bully's special prize is a Yamaha music cast system of 3 components there. To win, there's the YAS 306 soundbar, the WX10 wireless speaker, and the WX-AD10 wireless streamer, and that closes on the 20th of April.
That's a good prize.
Yeah, that WX-AD10, I don't know if you, for people that read my reviews, I have used that AD10 for more actual sort of test work than almost anything else I own. It's like a Rosetta Stone of streaming services. It does all of them. It's stupidly good for what it does. I mean, it's not the prettiest thing going, but my God, it's really, really clever.
Just for clarity, that's not the one that's going out in the competition, is it? It's not second-hand.
No. You get a brand new one, not a sad
covered in marmalade stains.
Not a sad, dusty one which uses an Android phone charger as its power supply. No, we got issued with one at the when they did the Music Cast 2 launch. But bless him, the then Yamaha sort of PR liaison guy was so desperate to get them to us that they only had EU samples, so they had no power supply in the box. So as I say, mine has an Android phone charger sat in the back of it, which is fine, you know. But no, it's a seriously clever little thing. Okay. So it's a cracking prize.
And when you win that prize, it'll come with a proper power cord. You don't need an Android thing. Right, okay, previous competition winners?
Yes. We've got Sarah 7, I've never heard of, who won the Juice on Blu-ray. True HD.
Sorry, she's probably never heard of you.
No. regular poster, actually.
Is she? Sorry.
Yeah, she is.
Sorry, Sarah 7. We've got True HD, who won Jigsaw and the 7 Saw movies on Blu-ray, and Guest of Honor won Thor Ragnarok on Ultra HD Blu-ray.
Okay, congratulations to our winners, and Sarah 7, who I've never heard of either, but Steve says is a regular, so well done, Sarah.
I'm really, really glad that AVForums' user policy prevents people from having euphemism names, you know, and Hugh Jass won such and such, and you know, dangly balls and all the rest of it, you know. So, congratulations there. It's all good.
Congratulations, we're a mature audience. Right, hardware news is coming up next. Okay, so moving on to hardware news, and this week some unusual things have happened. We're going to get into them. One of them's a really strange one, which we'll get to before the end of the hardware section. So make sure you're sat on your seat properly so you don't fall off your seat when we start talking about it. Anyway, let's go to the first item, which is again an unusual product, and it went to Mr. VR on the podcast, Steve, because it's a bit VR like, this thing. It's basically something you plonk on your head in front of your eyes and over your ears, and it creates a cinema on your head, Steve.
Yeah, it looks very similar to a number of VR headsets, particularly, I guess, the PS3, although I've got to say it's much better made. It's a really nicely made piece of kit. But yeah, you put it on your head. It's got over-ear headphones that cup over the ear, so they block out the outside world. They're also noise cancelling as well. And then there's the headset section in which you can adjust to the size of your head, and you put it over your eyes, and there's actually, again, sort of a soft rubber cup around the edges so it fits tight against your head. So you don't need to wear, if you're a glass like me, you wear spectacles, you don't need to wear your glasses when you're using this, because it fits over your head, and then you can adjust the focus and the interocular as well to suit your specific eyes, which is really nice little feature, because you don't get that on the VR headsets. And in fact, one of the problems is, you have to basically put them over your glasses for the best effect. But because you're looking at a specific point rather than, looking around a virtual world, they can do this. So yeah, you get it on your head. It blocks out all the light, and so you're completely, cut out from the outside world, basically. And you focus it, and it has two lenses composed of OLED screens. So it's two OLED screens, one for the left, one for right eye. And when they're combined, it creates the impression you're sat in front of, well, they call it 800-inch screen, but sat on the sofa in front of my screen, it's about the same kind of size feeling in terms of screen size that I would have if I had a 1.85 to 1 or 16 to 9 screen in front of me instead of a 2.35 to 1 screen. So it's a similar size to what I've got, which is 10 foot wide from my viewing angle. It just works out roughly about the same. Still looks big though. And once you've got the headset set on, essentially you're, as I say, you're blocked out from the outside world, and you're sitting there watching a film on a big screen with headphones on. I should say that the distance to your eyes, you have to be careful about not fogging up the lenses. So watch your breath, and also make sure that it's far enough away from your eyes that you don't see your eyes reflecting off of the lens itself. But once you set it up correctly, the effect is really impressive. And because it's using two separate OLED screens for each eye, it also supports 3D. It supports 1080p and 3D. And of course, there's absolutely no crosstalk because you have two completely separate images, one for each eye. And so the 3D, actual 3D effect is really, really good. And obviously, because they're OLED screens, you've got nice deep blacks. The picture quality is great. I mean, obviously, you can't calibrate it, but and it looks a little bit hot in terms of colors, I'd have to say. But overall, the actual image it creates, particularly with 3D, is really impressive. And you can plug in. It's actually got a control unit which has built-in memory, 32 gig, so you can load things on if you want to and watch a film that way. Or there's actually also a micro. Sorry, not a mini. That's a mistake I made initially by buying a mini and then realizing I needed a micro adapter. It's a micro HDMI adapter, so the ones you'd see on the side of mobile phones. And you can plug in a Blu-ray player, and you can also watch stuff. However, the reason it has the control unit with the built-in memory is because it's designed to be, and this bit made me laugh, a mobile home cinema. So the idea is you would, out and about, you would wear this thing.
How much does it weigh, Steve?
It's not that heavy. I mean, it's, once you've got it on properly, because there's obviously an over the top of the head strap and around the back strap as well. And it's not massively heavy. It's reasonably light, but as I say, quite well made. It's sort of solid, but it's designed to be worn for a couple of hours at least. So it doesn't feel uncomfortable over long periods of time. But I would dare anyone to sit on a bus or a train wearing this, because you're cut off from the outside world. So you get robbed blind. You wake up, no clothes on, or I mean, it's just the only place I can think of where you might consider doing it would be on an airplane, maybe. But yeah, I would personally not be uncomfortable wearing this in a public place.
Okay.
On the move.
Are you going to tell us what this is?
Oh, I haven't mentioned the name, have I? It's not a company I'm familiar with, by the way, so let me know if anyone else has heard of this, but it's called the Royole Moon. So Royole spelled Royole, and the product's called the Moon. And as I say, it's their mobile home cinema. And it costs about £890 on... you can get it on Amazon, actually.
Did you say £190?
£890. Oh. So it's quite expensive. And as I say, I can't see really... I wouldn't see myself using it actually whilst on the move, well, not literally on the move.
The thing is, though, would you, if you lived on your own, would you use it in the house? Because you could sit and watch a film for 2 hours and then take it off and you've been burgled.
presumably you'd buy it if you don't get on with your wife. It's a good way of cutting out everyone else's household. I guess if you like watching films and you do have a crowded house, and not the band, but an actual house full of people, and you want to watch a movie on your own without just disturbing everybody else, then this is definitely the way to do it.
I can see the appeal now. You said it like that.
You can sit down on the sofa, all comfy, cut out the outside world, and watch a movie in peace and quiet.
But would it not be a bit like the VR experience? I'm just thinking of Ed here. I mean, Ed sitting with this thing, and then a cat suddenly jumped on his lap. I mean,
it's not quite as just yes,
or indeed a small child decides to just bundle you. Yeah, well,
because you're not. Go on, sorry.
No, I've got to be honest. I've been looking at some of the bits. I honestly, from a personal perspective, there are probably medical procedures I'd rather undergo than use a device of this nature. But I guess I'm not the target audience, so I guess it's not an issue I have to face. Is the honest answer to that.
Presumably, you're happy wearing headphones for long periods of time.
I am. But that doesn't destroy my
blindfolded.
It doesn't destroy my situational awareness. Headphones. That's the very key difference.
Yeah, this seems really weird to me. This whole idea of this device. It's because you are, unless, like you say, you want to try and get away from it all, and you have got a busy household or whatever. It seems like a strange thing to take yourself away completely. Because I mean, even sitting around watching a film in the cinema room or whatever, you've still got your positional awareness and that kind of thing. To me, I think I would find it weird on something like that. How did you find the experience, Steve?
I tended to use it in the home cinema with the door closed, so I was on my own anyway. Which sounds kind of, if you're in a home cinema, what's the point? But basically, I just thought it was a nice, quiet, secure location where I wasn't going to get disturbed. Because as you say, Phil, if someone suddenly starts tapping you on the shoulder when you're into a film, it's not quite as disconcerting as it is when you're in a VR world, because then you're in a different world, and you're looking around this world. And if someone starts tapping you on the shoulder, they're invisible in the VR world, and it totally freaks you out. But this is obviously you're watching a film, so it's not quite as disconcerting when someone does that. But I guess I quite enjoyed it because, like I say, if you do like 3D, this is probably the best way of watching 3D because you are sending a perfect signal to each eye. And I guess if you lived, maybe you'd say you lived alone or in a small room where you didn't have the option for a big TV or a projector screen, this is one way of getting a similar kind of experience. If you are limited in what you can do in your current environment. So maybe you could look at it that way. What I don't think it's going to be something I would use ever for is taking it on the move. Not literally while I'm walking, but on a train or on a bus. Maybe perhaps you're going to be in a hotel room for a long period of time. Though obviously you're going to get so much onto the mobile device that controls it anyway.
Did you watch any porn on it?
No, I didn't. But now you mentioned that's a bloody good idea.
Oh God!
Just don't do it on a train.
That's on you, Hodge.
We were once on a press trip in Japan, and traffic lights on the bus, and someone looked out the window of the bus, and there was a car next to us, and there was a Japanese guy. He was driving his car. He had a blanket over his lap and a TV screen. Yeah, no, this is going exactly where you think is going. TV screen showing pornography, where the sat-nav screen is on the car, and let's say one of his hands wasn't on the steering wheel. That was a bit disconcerting. Yeah, so I like the tech. I think it's well made. It works really well. I wouldn't personally consider it something I would take on a journey with me, unless maybe I was going to use it in a hotel room or something like that, to watch a movie one evening, possibly on a plane, but certainly not on a bus or train.
How's it compared to the Sony one? Did you review
picture quality wise? No, I haven't. The only thing I've used, you can do this with the PSVR. You can watch movies and 3D movies 1080p. Well, it's not shown at 1080p on the PSVR because the resolution is lower than that on a PSVR. So this is a much better experience than that because obviously it's a full 1080p image for each eye. Yeah, I mean, £890 is quite a bit of money too. But as I say, if you perhaps were in a situation where having a projector screen or even a large TV wasn't an option, and maybe you wanted to didn't want to make a lot of noise, maybe if you say you're in a bed set or something like that, or if you're in a bed seat, you probably can't afford to drop £190 on a mobile headset. Yeah, it's an interesting product, although I'm not entirely sure who it's aimed at, other than really big fans of 3D. who might find it really useful, because, as I say, in that sense, it delivers quite simply the best 3D experience you're going to get, because, as I say, each eye is totally independent. There's no crossover or ghosting or anything like that. It's pin sharp. So that looked really good. I enjoy playing around with it.
What's it like over the nose?
It's very comfortable, actually, because, like I say, it's balanced nicely, and because it's got this sort of soft rubber seal around the eyes area, I mean, it's definitely, I find it more comfortable to wear than the PSVR, even though it's heavier than the PS, slightly heavier, not a lot, but slightly heavier than the PS. So it's just the way it's been designed. It is a very comfortable wear for the length of a movie.
Does it leave lines on your head where it's been resting against it?
No, it doesn't, because it's well padded. Actually, it doesn't really. It's not like So I know what you mean. Sometimes you come out looking like you're wearing a diving mask or something and it's squeezed around your face. No, it's nice and comfortable. And like I say, because it's got these soft rubber seals around the eyes and around the ears too. Cut out the outside world, but also are quite comfortable. I enjoy playing around with it, I have to say. I don't know if I would invest in one personally, mainly because I don't need to, because I have an actual screen and home cinema. And like I say, it's sort of marketed as being this mobile home cinema, but I'm not quite sure in what situation you'd be prepared to actually wear one without getting mugged, or waking up with with a cock drawn on your forehead or something like that. I don't know. But the technology is impressive and it does work really well. As it does what it advertises. It gives the impression of being sat in front of a big screen, and it can do 3D really, really well. So
okay. So we were always told that in the future we'd have these types of things on our head, and where we could watch films and that kind of thing, and the technology is slowly getting there. But the whole disconcerting thing of being shut off, that's probably what would do it for me, in terms of I wouldn't be able to use it. Talking about moving into the future, Ed's bought a new TV.
Well, technically, anyway. I need to do minor things like pay for it and get them to acknowledge, how I pay for it and stuff. But yes, I have joined the another sign up to the official television of AVForums staff. I've got I will also be partaking in a 55-inch B7 OLED, because I looked at the 8 series stuff out in Vegas. I spoke to you two, who at least purport to understand what's going on, and thought, okay, seems like about the right time. So yes, hopefully before the end of the financial year, because that's kind of an important detail in all of this, I will have secured one of those.
Excellent. Good stuff. And like we say, I mean, the B7, you can't go wrong with it at the minute, and at the prices in the shops that thing's gone for, if you can find places with stock. And obviously the C7 is the same, it just has a different stand. So if you can find one of those screens, obviously it gets a recommendation from the AVForums team, because that's 3 members of the team now who have bought one.
So Hodge is the outlier.
Maverick. Phillips owner.
He wanted the Ambilight, didn't he? So.
Yeah.
I did. I've now got 12 hue lights around the house.
Well, it's an interesting one. I mean, I in terms of the absolute timetable that I would normally make the move into a given technology, I still can't pass a test which applied when I switched from standard definition to high definition. I cannot watch the better part of an evening's viewing in 4K. Still can't do that. So in some regards, it's earlier than I would otherwise like to be making the transition over. But in terms of the ability to relevantly review certain items, it is about time. And new stuff.
Is that what you're telling the taxman then?
Yeah, well, no. There's no ambiguity about this. It is a device used in the pursuit of how I earn a living. So yes, it's a tax deductible item.
We've all
yeah.
Damn right it is.
I think we'll be able to convert you once you got this B7 in. Once you've experienced HDR and Dolby Vision, and there's some great stuff on Netflix at the minute. And you've got a decent internet as well. So unlike Steve, who's still on dial-up, at least you're able to get all this 4K streaming with HDR and all the rest of it. And there's some, like I said, some cracking stuff that you should be getting your teeth into straight away with that.
I'm looking forward to it. I also have secured the services of a professional
who is the husband of one of my wife's friends, who is a very, very, very good installer. So he's going to do the tedious business of getting up on the wall and things like that. So I don't have to concern myself with that. I mean, obviously, people, and anytime I've posted a photo on Facebook of the catastrophe that lurks at the front of my lounge, people go, "Oh, your telly looks a bit small," as it's 42 at the moment. It's going to be very large.
Yeah, for about 4 days, Ed.
Oh, yeah.
4 or
got
5 days, and then I've got 65-inch in the corner, and I need bigger, basically.
And then, brilliantly, obviously, the nature of trickle-down technology. My GT60 is off to live with a friend of mine when they successfully move house. It's their move from standard definition to high definition. So it's if you like, it's an evolutionary thing. Although the thing they're most excited about, and I love this. This is reality versus the compact world of AVForums. The thing that they're looking forward to most is that it's got what the Panasonic has got wireless built in, and because the USB sockets have power to them all the time, you can run a Fire TV stick, which it needs because it doesn't have Amazon on board, without having to have a separate power supply for the Fire TV stick. They're absolutely thrilled about that bit. So yes, I just got to remember where I put the pedestal stand and stuff like that. So.
I mean, the thing that stops me from upgrading is the fact of getting things through the door, which you don't have an issue with because your door's not on your stairs. But
no.
65 is as big as I can, and I've only gotten this 65 in because it came in really flat packaging, which much TVs come in nowadays, retail TVs. If it was review stuff that comes in flight cases, Steve, there's absolutely no way I'd get up the stairs. So I think 65
You're waiting for rollable then,
yeah.
Aren't you, before you upgrade?
The thing I have to be honest that has put me off is, I guess, I've held off for as long as I can, is I just find the depreciation on this stuff to be just heartbreaking. I mean, don't get me wrong, I didn't pay a huge amount of money for the Panasonic. It was so near the end of its lifespan, I didn't even bother making any contact for a staff purchase at Richter Sounds or affiliated purchase. I just went in and bought it because it was about 780 quid or something like that. But the thing is, okay, actually over the course of the time I've used it, that works out as a bit over 100 quid a year, which I'm fine with, but it is effectively worth nothing.
Yeah.
Which is not the same for any of my 2-channel stuff. It always retains some level of value. Well, and the requirement for 4K pass through with the correct HDCP means realistically changing AV receiver as well. So the Yamaha 3040 that I've been using for a number of years, that is currently sat in front of me out of the rack. And again, that was a £2,000 AV receiver, and it is to all intents and purposes worth nothing. And that's just heartbreaking.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a Panasonic 3D Full HD Plasma, the VT20B 50-inch, sitting in its box. I mean, it's all boxed up and everything in my living room. And it'll be worth nowadays. And it's got 3D glasses and stuff for it. It'll be worth nothing. And next to it is a Pioneer Kuro 5090, which is sitting there, hasn't been switched on for a few years. Again, even though that was a collectible TV in the time, you'd be lucky to get 100 quid for it now. And I've just sold my DJI Spark drone because I'm not going to be using it this year, and I thought, well, I better turn it into cash. And heartbreakingly, that was only worth 50% of what I paid for it. So, yeah, electronics, consumer electronics, high prices, but not a lot in terms of resale value. Certainly, after the first 12 months, has gone by 50% or lower in terms of value, and usually lower.
Whereas
the only thing that keeps its money though is mobile phones. That's the
right mobile phones, for sure.
The right mobile phones. Yeah, sorry.
Well, I would say 2-channel stuff. It doesn't get anywhere near 50% depreciation in that time frame. And if you buy the right items,
yeah, but then you're talking about a niche market, though, Ed. You're not talking about a wide mass market there. You're talking about a niche where people understand what the product is and are prepared to pay for it.
Well, this is true, but I would argue that £2,000 AV receivers are pretty niche. It doesn't stop them being valueless. So,
yeah, well, I mean that comes back to, I mean, Denon have gone back to their old business model of having units out for a number of years and upgrading them at the half-life, which is what they should be doing. But like you say, Yamaha, they're bunging stuff out every year that's no different to what's gone before. Maybe a couple of tweaks to the software or whatever, and then discounting the old year so they can get the new year into this. So they're bringing it on themselves basically with their business model.
Well, yeah, I mean, in the specific case of the 3040 that's in front of me, it doesn't have. Is it HDCP 2.2? It doesn't have that, so essentially its ability to do much in a 4K world is very, very limited.
I think the step
specifically dismantles its value.
Yeah, well,
I think its replacement doesn't have that issue.
Well, I've got the replacement. I've got the 3050 in my cinema room, and it's fine. The only thing it doesn't do is Dolby Vision, but I don't need Dolby Vision in that room, so
I have to
it's
say,
not an issue for me.
In terms of Denon upgrading stuff, which they've obviously we were talking about the X850 recently and how there's an upgrade path for that. Honourable mention goes to Denon because when they launched the X7200, which I've got, there was an upgrade path for that in terms of replacing the HDMI boards for HDMI 2.0 B, so they could do things like so it could do HLG and also some other. Basically for HDR as well. But when they announced their update for some of their receivers for last year that were going to be updated for HLG and Dolby Vision, specifically Dolby Vision, they did say at the time that upgrade wouldn't apply to the X7200. And to my surprise, last week I turned it on and it updated the firmware and it added HLG and Dolby Vision to the X700s. They've actually added something they weren't originally going to even do.
Well, that's all power.
Full credit for them. Yeah, no, full credit to them for offering something that they didn't actually intend to do originally. But so that means that the X7200 is still a totally valid, up-to-date receiver.
If you under promise and over deliver, that is all. If that is the textbook, it doesn't matter what line of business you work in. Under promise and over deliver, you'll never have disappointed clientele if you can do that.
Yeah, and as somebody rightly pointed out, I think it was last week's podcast. I failed to mention it within the podcast, but yeah, I mentioned it in the review of the latest Yamaha AV receiver. I don't understand why there is this need to change a product every year. It seems counterproductive to what yes, it's nice to have something nice and shiny every 12 months, but there's no need for that. Look at other businesses like the motor industry. A model's around for 7 years. Yes, things change a lot quicker in consumer electronics, but if you build something, and we've discussed this in the past as well, Ed, and a good company for that is NAD, which you're going to talk about next. They make modular designs for their stuff, so it's easier to take boards out, and Lingdorf do the same thing with their hi-fi stuff, where you can take the components out and swap them over for updated components and so on, and flash new software. So it is possible to have an upgrade route and to have a model on sale for a couple of years, and it makes investment a bit more worthwhile. Then you're paying for something that's going to be supported for at least 3 or 4 years, and
it certainly takes the edge off.
It does. So we're going to talk about NAD. This is where people are going to fall off the chair, because you're not reviewing hi-fi with this. This is an AV receiver going in your room.
Yeah, don't look out on the website immediately for this. It's going to take a little while for copy to appear on this one for long and convoluted reasons. But yes, earlier this week I removed my existing AV receiver and put a different one in, and my God, I was reminded of how much I hate doing that. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I have made every opportunity to make it as simple as possible. Every speaker connection for the AV receiver at the amp end is 4mm plug. It's not at the speaker end, because I test speakers which will not accept 4mm plugs. Everything is very clearly labelled, and wherever possible, it's it is very complex back there, but it's all marked and relatively logical, and it's still hateful. Completely hateful.
Yeah, well, think about us who do it on a regular basis.
Well, that's your poison. To be honest, I mean, you're welcome to it. It is an absolutely disenchanting business from start to finish.
I do detest it, and even using banana plugs and stuff to make it easier. The thing is, you get a new model in, you've got to go into the speaker terminals and remove all the plastic bongs.
Well, I had the presence of mind. I had the presence of mind to do that before I actually slid it back.
But
yeah. It's just stuff like that. And then obviously the banana plugs that you use, the ones I use are the screw type, so you can screw the cable in because it makes it easier. But of course they've been sitting for a while, so when you come and pull them out, you pull the cable out as well. So you've got to sit and redo that and reattach them to the banana plug, and then take the plastic bungs out, and then put everything in, and then you've got to make sure that I've got them labelled, so the speaker cables are labelled, but of course they've been sitting there for a while, so as you're pulling out, you also rip the rip the sticker off, so you're not sure which is which now, which is the left channel and right channel. Oh, it's a nightmare.
Well, the thing
nightmare.
is, though, my rant here is not directed at NAD specifically. The back of this AV receiver has one layout foible, I'll use the word foible because I'm feeling polite today, that is incomprehensible, but every single AV receiver I've tested over the last 10 years has one back panel foible which is incomprehensible. What I'd give at least some pounds for is just a moment of standardization. Now, I appreciate that everyone does things differently, but if you could lay out the speaker channels in the same order, I don't necessarily understand why that is an impossibility for manufacturers.
Yeah, well, it's easy when you got one that comes in from this. So I've recently had a Yamaha through, so that was nice and easy. I just sat it on top of the one that I've already got in the rack, turned them sideways on, took the plastic bungs out, and then I just swapped everything over because the back panel layout is exactly the same. So it was dead easy to move everything just up one layer into the new one. But I also realised that logically, the speakers are not laid out on the back in any logic, because you would think it would go left, centre, right, left surround, right surround, then the rear surrounds, then the height channels, and it's not. It's all mixed around. So the centre's on the right hand side, the left channel's on the left, the right's next to it, and then you've got the height speakers. Then you've got it's
so
annoying.
There's that. But then this is an even more specific one. I don't understand. Now, obviously, people are going to be installing from different angles. It sounds like you're going in from the side, I'm going in over the top, and so on and so forth. So we're going to have different views on this, literally different views on this. But the Yamaha that's just come out, the HDMI sockets run across the top of the back panel. And that's fine. So you work up from the bottom. Speaker connections, digital connections, HDMI connections, jobs are good. The NAD, the HDMIs are in a vertical stack, which makes for an interesting installation exercise. That's the incomprehensible bit. But what I don't understand in this instance is connections that don't see very much use have got pride of place near the top of the back panel and would be very accessible from the side as well. Specifically things like the trigger, the 12-volt trigger inputs and outputs, which realistically are going to be a one-time only connection if you use them at all. I don't understand. I mean, obviously the internal componentry layout is going to dictate where things terminate on the back panel. But the Yamaha was infuriating because reaching the optical connections from the top requires you to be a Jedi and basically use the Force. So that was infuriating. NAD have given pride of place to the trigger connections at the top whilst vertically stacking the HDMIs, which is a pain in the arse to fit things in. And it's just think about it, people. Just be essentially think of the likelihood that the connection is going to have to be accessed after the amp has been pushed back, and possibly work to sticking those nearer the top.
Interestingly, you are probably the one person on this podcast who still needs analog connections, are you?
Well, this is where it gets complicated. I use analog connections all the time, but not on an AV receiver.
Right. Well, there you go. So our argument, I know Steve's the same as me, and we've been banging on it for a long time. Why do we still have these legacy connections on an AVR? We don't need them anymore. You need digital and HDMI, and that's it.
To be fair, I have seen that even in the time between the AV receivers in front of me at the moment, there is rationalization going on.
There is, but it's not fast enough for me. I mean, if you want to have a high quality audio thing, then yes, have a couple of legacy RCAs and maybe a couple of balanced XLRs for that purpose, and maybe a phono stage with a ground, which Denon and Yamaha still do that so far. So you have that. Then you have your HDMIs, and have your HDMIs at the top, because most of the best designs I've seen are the HDMI connectors at the top, because those are the ones that you're going to swap around the most. And like you say, lean over the AVR to do that. So if it's at the top, it makes it easier. Then have your digital connections and whatever. But you don't need the rows and rows and rows of legacy connections anymore. So just have a couple and have a couple of balanced XLRs and do away with the rest. And the only other reason you would have RCAs on the back or XLRs is if you want to have pre-out stages, which I would still want them to have. So, but cut the rest out. And make it a bit more logical. It's nice to see that Denon and Yamaha try to do that. It maybe doesn't work for everybody, but they do try and clump things together so they're nice and easy to find. But there's no need for component inputs anymore. No need for composite inputs anymore when it comes to video switching and all that kind of thing. And like I say, if you need a couple of analog audio inputs, then fine, have a couple there and maybe some XLRs, but you don't need anything else. As long as you got your digital connectors there, then you're fine.
I've got to say, when it comes to the back panel layout, by far and away the best when it comes to designing this have been Denon and Marantz. I mean, they basically have the same layout, so lump them together. But they've done exactly what you've asked for, Phil. At the top, all the HDMI inputs and outputs along the top. Easy access, carefully, clearly labelled.
Yeah, Yamaha do the same. So they're
all along the bottom. Yeah. All along the bottom, the speaker binding posts in a straight line, starting with front right, front left, centre, surround right, surround left, surround back right, surround left. It's all sensibly laid out and colour coded, and it comes with that nice little thing with the sticky label, so you can mark your cables for each one if you want to, which is bloody handy when you're swapping around cables a lot. And then they have made to a certain extent they've tried to reduce the number of legacy inputs, so there's still quite a few on the X8 500. But I think they've definitely made an effort to make the back panel as logical as possible, and I think of the ones I've seen, theirs has been the best effort in terms of trying to make it logical and user friendly.
Yeah, Ed, I just want to come back to the vertical HDMIs. Do you mean that the HDMI inputs are actually vertical as well?
No, they HDMI, although just to be royally infuriating, they are inverted 180 degrees from the ones on the Yamaha. So all of my HDMI cables have decided to be in one direction for the last 4 years and are now profoundly unhappy.
You do know that signals only move one way down a cable.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's always the direction of the arrow, remember that.
But it's more, they are the alignment is conventional, but instead of being in a horizontal row, they are in a vertical stack.
Right. And is that at the edge of the back unit, is it?
It's in from the it is towards the edge, but it is not.
You're not going to see the cables overhanging out the side of the AVR, is what I'm getting at. Because on some TVs that's infuriating.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's not an issue. And I would say, in terms of rationalising legacy inputs, this particular model has no composite, no component, and obviously S-video connections have disappeared into the ether anyway. So the legacy video switching has been knocked on the head, and it's from the perspective of NAD also having a foot in the hi-fi section. I would argue its connectivity is very, very logical. It's more, I have some foibles with how it has been arranged on the back panel than actually the physical nature of what it does.
What market level is this, Ed?
I believe it hasn't actually gone up on the UK sites yet, but it is a £2,000-ish unit, especially with the Blue OS module, which turned up as well.
It's a 777, is it?
Yeah, 777B3.
777B3. Be interesting to see what you think of that, because the last NAD I looked at was their processor, the pre-pro processor, and that was fantastic. However, it didn't do Atmos and it didn't do DTSX at the time, which was a bit of an issue for it back then. So it'll be interesting to see how you get on with this.
Well, this is Atmos enabled. Interestingly, it doesn't seem to have DTSX, or at least it has no logos for DTSX, but potentially more useful and of great interest, I suspect, to people is that it does have Dirac.
Is it full fat Dirac or Dirac Lite?
Dirac Live. I don't know where that sits in the great scheme of Diracing. I wasn't aware that there were different levels of it. So I haven't actually done that bit yet. Ironically, at the moment, it's simply being run with the settings that I know from by heart in terms of distance to and just response to test tone. So we'll see. I'll be looking at that. I'm actually pushing through some different things at the moment, so I'll get onto the Dirac-y bit in the fullness of time. But my last experience with Dirac with the Arcam SR250 was the most positive I have had from room optimization. So I shall be interested to see how I get on.
Okay, good stuff. We're running a bit over time, and I want to get to Steve now, so we'll look forward to that NAD review when it eventually comes, when you can eventually get round to, forcing yourself to sit and watch some films.
Well, there is that
in multi-channel and so on. But Steve, you paid visit to a British manufacturer yesterday. You went to have a look at the new demo room, so that's Arcam over in Cambridge. What did you think?
Well, you say demo room, they actually refer to it as their Centre for Cinematic Excellence. So if you're going to call something that, you better deliver the goods. Luckily for Arcam, they did. Basically, they moved into a new office on a science park about 4 years ago. 18 months ago, a section of the building they were in became available, basically just a big empty space. And they thought, perfect, if we take this, we can do the ideal thing, which is to build a room within a room, and we can have the exact ratios we want in terms of the room dimensions. We can double line the walls. We can build a dedicated room, and we can really go to town. That's what they did. They've actually built 2 rooms. One's a stereo listening room, and the other one is a fully fledged home cinema. And basically what they've done is they've built these rooms from scratch. They've designed them, the layouts, the dimensions, all double walled with insulation in between the 2 layers, double walled ceilings. Floors they've got a hardened, so a tiled area at the front, which is where they're actually putting speakers in, because they wanted when they were doing, particularly with their moving in and out stereo speakers and this sort of thing for demos, they wanted a solid surface on which they could place the speaker stand. Exactly. And the rest of the room obviously has very thick carpeting to absorb any reflections. They've treated the room in terms of reflection points, both at the sides and at the rear, and also they had in the stereo room they had bass traps in the 4 corners as well. In the home cinema room, they've done a similar approach. So they've designed the room. They've got a hard tiled surface right at the very front where the speakers are placed, but the rest of it's all soft carpeting, double layered ceiling and walls. They've got reflection points, absorption panels full of reflection points at the sides and at the opposite, and also on the ceiling, actually, a point on the ceiling. And then they have, they didn't do much in the way of, obviously, towards the rear room, they want to keep that lively, which makes sense. And then they've got 7 channels at ear height, 3 front channels, 2 big floor standers and a center speaker, and then 2 side and 2 rear built-in wall speakers. They had 4 subs, 2 at the front, 2 at the back, and also 6 overhead channels built into the ceiling. Now, they're only currently using 2, although they could use, so although there's 6 up there, that's got kind of forward thinking. If we're going to start putting speakers up on the ceiling and wiring stuff, we may as well wire for 6, even though their current receiver and processor only drives 4 overhead channels. But what they can do is use the center 2 channels, overhead channels, if they want to, for a sort of 7.1.2 setup, if they were doing that as a demo for somebody. But they thought, thinking ahead, we'll put in 6 in the ceiling. And so there's a full Atmos DTS setup. They also have in there a Sony VW550 projector, massive screen, but Draper screen. And in terms of the audio kit, they've got the AVR 850, which is a 7-channel AV receiver, but also with a 429 4-channel AV amps. That's all Class G amplification for running a full 7.4.4 setup. And then they also have their is it the AV 850, which is the AV 850 or AV 880, their preprocessor, and then with that, that's combined with I think they were using 7 monoblocks for the 7 channels, and then also using a 429 for the overheads. Started off with a demo using the AVR 850, and interestingly, I sat down and said, okay, so you pretty much designed this room from scratch, so you've eliminated all the issues you might have with the room itself. Speaker placement is ideal. So with Dirac Live, what has it got to do? And obviously it was an interesting question. They said, yeah, you're absolutely right. A lot of it you can, a lot of times when you're doing things like using Room EQ software like Dirac Live, you're trying to compensate for the fact that you couldn't use an ideal situation and you have to compromise to a certain extent. So with us, obviously the room itself has been designed from scratch. The speakers are all perfectly placed. We've got 4 subs to even out the bass, but there's still things that need doing, but they're not all identical speakers, for example. So what Dirac is doing is it's adjusting for tonal differences in the speakers. Also, it's adjusting for things like any reflections in the room. Even though you've eliminated some, there's still plenty of reflections in any room, and so the impulse responses is adjusting for those, and also any phase differences as well. So we did a demo with it off, and then I did a demo same thing with it on, which is you've got it feel the Atmos disc with the rain falling. Yeah, that's it's just an audio, so there's no video. It's just audio of a rainstorm, basically. And even though that sounded great in Atmos with Dirac Live off, once you put it on, the room, any kind of sense of you being in a room just disappeared, and you were just in a rainstorm. It's an incredibly impressive piece of software, I've got to say. And we also did the Amaze trailer, which I'm sure you're familiar with again. Now, I've seen that trailer in Dolby's own screening room in Atmos, and I can honestly say that as far as I could tell, it didn't sound any different to it did in the Arcam one, which is a real credit to Arcam. They've done a brilliant job in terms of not just designing and building a room, but also the quality of their equipment and the incredible abilities of Dirac Live as well, in terms of delivering a really impressive experience. We also watched some demo stuff. So there's the bombing run scene at the beginning of Unbroken, which is a cracking piece of sound design. That sounded absolutely amazing. I watched that one with the AV processor, actually, and that was because the processing is the same in both the AVR 850 and the processor, but obviously they just had more amplification, less noise, and just more headroom to play with, and that was an incredible experience. We also watched Everest. Again, it's on the demo disc, on the Atmos demo disc. It's the one where they're on the mountain and that storm suddenly comes in, and that was absolutely fantastic, because not only could you just hear that it wasn't just snow but ice that's hitting them, but also there's a brilliant bit where you get a rumble of thunder that just rumbles through the entire room. It was absolutely amazing. Really, really impressive, I've got to say. I mean, the AVR 850 is a staggeringly impressive piece of kit, and hearing it in the best possible conditions, absolutely perfectly set up, shows you just how impressive it can be. I was. I mean, they did set the bar high, Centre for Cinema Excellence, but they delivered, in my opinion. So
did they name it before they set it up, or did they name it afterwards?
I don't know, actually. I don't know, but luckily for them, yeah, because if you're setting a stall that high, you better deliver. You can't be crap. Obviously, I got a chance this week, and I know 18 AVForums members will be getting a chance to experience it for themselves a week tomorrow, or on the Saturday the 24th. There's a special open day, and the first 80 people that applied.
If you're listening to this, it's a bit late. It was the first 18 people, and that was a while ago.
I think they might do a second day, actually. I think they were talking about having so many people were keen to come that they may do a second day, but I don't know. Okay.
It'll be interesting. So if people want to keep an eye on the forums, then if you're interested in that kind of thing, because if they're thinking about doing a second day, you might get your chance. And those lucky people that have replied and gotten a place, go along is what you're basically saying.
Yes, definitely. Tell you one little surprise at the end, which when they said, what do you think of the subs? Because they're actually their own custom built subs. They were using them at Bristol show a couple of years ago as well. They're using 18-inch drivers, and I said, they sounded great, tight, controlled, responsive. And he goes, yeah, do you know what? We're driving those 4 subs using one of our 429 Class G amplifiers. And I thought, really? They're not active subs? He said, no. I said, that is really impressive. That gives you an idea of how good Class G can be. I was quite a surprise at the end.
Yeah, good stuff. Sounds excellent. And you'll be writing a little write-up on that one, and get some photographs for us as well. What was the room like in terms of lighting and so on? How had they designed it for picture quality? I know it sounds
well, but the room is dark. No, the room was pretty much blacked out. Good. Some dark greys in there as well, but it was a very dark room. But luckily for me, taking some pictures, it also had plenty of lights they could turn on.
Yeah, which is what you want. So that was the cinema room. Did you have a listen to the stereo room? Or are you leaving that one?
I did actually. No, I did go in the stereo room too, and they were using it was the same demo they were doing at Bristol, actually, but they were using these new Revel speakers. I got to say, it sounded spectacular. I was really impressed. Revel's not a brand I'm familiar with, Ed. Are you massively familiar with them?
They don't crop up too often in Europe, but I had a demonstration. I went to do a dealer piece at a dealer not too far from the Welsh border, in fact, and they had them as well. They were in one of the systems. It was actually quite a heavy Harman Group system, because it was a Mark Levinson integrated. And possibly not the last word in absolute subtlety, but really quite impressive in a stereo sense. The problem is, by the time you get to the sort of price points they're at, there's just so many speaker brands to choose from. They can't all have they can't all have heavy representation. That's the long and the short of it. You're always going to have your strong domestic brands, and then a couple of favoured international ones, and it's luck of the draw, and down to huge amounts of effort on the part of the distributors as to whether you're one of the favoured import brands. And Rev will make great product, but there's no shortage of people to choose from.
Steve, I didn't catch the price. What was the price of them?
3,000.
Okay.
For a pair of bookshelves. So
yeah.
not cheapest, but they sounded fantastic. So.
Yep, good stuff. So look out for Steve's write-up. That's it for hardware news. We'll be back with movie news and reviews next. Okay, so moving on to movie news and reviews, and I can see this being a bit of a common theme this year, Steve, because neither of us have been to the cinema, but we've reviewed a new film.
Yes, quite changing times, eh?
So it is. I got to watch it on the projector last night on a big scope screen. It was in scope. I've got to say, it looked absolutely fantastic. That's Annihilation. So we'll come into the movie in a bit. I just want to do the AV side, because I've seen a lot of comments about, it's Netflix, it's on a small screen and all the rest of it. But let me tell you, I've got a decent internet connection here, so I'm running 76 meg, but it'll only stream to a certain point anyway. There is a lot of compression on Netflix, but it was on a 10-foot scope screen from a JVC projector, properly calibrated. Now that's the important point, it was properly calibrated. In the cinema room, which is a completely black room, it looked stunning. It looked absolutely fantastic. I don't know who the director of photography is, but there's an element of the story which I'm not going to... This is spoiler free, by the way, so when we come on to speaking about the film, we'll keep it as spoiler free as possible. It is available on Netflix. Anybody can go and watch it. It's not as if you've got to go to the cinema to see this. So anybody that's got Netflix or access to Netflix can be able to see this. See it on as big a screen as possible, if you can, because it really does make a difference to the presentation, to the production design, which looks absolutely beautiful. Cinematography... There's a point in the story where it talks about light and other things, and if you look at the way that the light is designed within this film, and the way that there is, because first of all there's a lot of lens flare, and I'm thinking, oh, this guy thinks he's J.J. Abrams, but then actually when you start getting into the film and you start realising what's happening and what it is that's going on, it makes complete and utter sense, and it looks beautiful throughout. I mean, absolutely, cinematography is astoundingly good. Special effects, yes, you could say it's direct to Netflix, but actually it was made for theatrical release. It's just that Paramount panicked with this, and I can see why, because if you think along the lines of Arrival, although maybe not as intense as Arrival, but it certainly has that feel about it, Steve. To a certain extent, so you could see why the panic. But kudos to the director and the producers for standing their ground and sticking to their original vision, because I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was a great film. I understood what they were trying to say with it, and that's not to say that you get it or you don't get it. It's just that it resonated with me. I understood what they were saying. There was lots of themes running throughout which converge at the end to, and I'm not, like I say, this is spoiler free, so we're not going to spoil it for you. But if you like science fiction that's not just about explosions and aliens and all the rest of it, because there's horror elements which I loved, and I hate horror films. I don't like the horror genre at all, but I love this. I love the way that they played on it, because it's realistic horror. It's not over the top sci-fi, usual sci-fi stuff with monsters and all the rest of it. There's actually a degree of reality kept here. It's just slightly tweaked. And that's the thing about the whole thing. There's things are just slightly different, and again, we don't want to spoil it, so we're not going to go into that too much. But it's the theme throughout, and they talk about various themes, they talk about various illnesses and that kind of thing, and it all comes to a point towards the end. I've got to say, acting wise, supporting actors weren't great. There's a couple who really got on my nerves, but overall, I thought it was really good. So yeah, in terms of the film, I can see why it's dividing audiences. I can see why current comments. This is Friday morning. Current comments on the review is 106 in terms of the comments. So there's a lot of discussion about it. If you've seen it and you want to discuss it, then head over to the review on the site and head over to the discussions, because there's some really great points raised within the discussion as well about it. If you're going to do that, use the spoiler tags, people. But once you've seen it, it's interesting reading other people's interpretations of it, because there are a few interpretations. It's not a film that is big on exposition. It doesn't overdo it. It doesn't tell you what's going on. It leaves a lot of it for you to, decide what you think is going on and what the purpose is, and what exactly are they trying to say with this. And I like that in a sci-fi. I like a film where you're thinking about it a few hours afterwards. And you're still thinking about the various points, and I've got to say it has the best bear scene since The Revenant in it as well.
Yeah, really good, really well done. Actually, the effects are superb.
Yeah, really good. So that's my thinking of it, and I'm going to agree with Kaz. I think it was an 8 out of 10. So what did you think, Steve?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with everything you just said. To be honest, I think it's an intelligent film. It makes you think. It's not an easily accessible film. You're going to have to really pay attention, and I can see why. I totally understand why Paramount may have balked at the idea of releasing internationally, because it's not an easy film to market. It's quite divisive in terms of its interpretation, and I can see it not really appealing to a mass audience, which is a shame, because it's a really good film. And I think Alex Garland's turning into a really good filmmaker, actually, because Ex Machina was fantastic as well.
Yeah,
and apparently
it's got that vibe about it as well. If you liked Ex Machina, you're going to love this, because it's got that vibe about it as well.
And he wrote Sunshine, which I've grown to love over the years. He also wrote and apparently directed a lot of Dread behind the scenes, it's turned out. And yes, no, it's well directed. I think it's got a solid cast. I think Natalie Portman and Oscar Isaacs are very good. And as you say, it looks incredible at times. I mean, and that's very much part of the story. The visuals are an important part of the story, and in fact, some aspects, as you say, make more sense later in the film when you start to understand what's actually going on. But yeah, it doesn't lay out for you on a plate. You've got to think about it. It's one of those films you do think about afterwards quite a bit. I found myself reading about it, and because it's one of 3 books, it's the first of 3 books. And I was trying to work out, okay, where the other 2 books are going to go then. So whether it will get a second film, the second book will get made, I don't know, because it's been popular on Netflix, and it didn't do massively well in the States, though, unsurprisingly. But overall, yes, I think this is the first Netflix movie that you can honestly say is a proper film and a good one as well. There's no sort of sense of it being a sort of low budget TV movie whatsoever, because obviously it was made for the cinema. But
there's this trend going on at the minute where studios are finding out that they can dump stuff onto Netflix quite easily. And I mentioned Arrival, and I've got to say, when I went to the cinema to see that, and I saw that opening day, and there was me and 3 other people in the screening, and that's never a good sign on opening day. And that was a early evening showing as well on a Friday. So you got to look at films like that and think now, would they still get international releases now that this trend's here? It would Arrival have suddenly been a Netflix film internationally, and films like that.
It's funny. It's interesting because you could say, well, that would be a shame if Arrival didn't get a cinema release. I know that Alex Garland is somewhat disappointed that Annihilation hasn't been released theatrically outside of the US. But obviously, it depends on what kind of equipment you've got at home. Because, like you, Phil, I'm lucky enough to have a home cinema, so I watched Annihilation as it was meant to be seen on a big screen, projected. Well, yes, my internet connection isn't as fast as yours, but it still looked fantastic. I've got to say, whatever Netflix do for their compression, it really works. And also, the soundtrack was excellent too.
Yeah,
the Dolby Digital soundtrack was really good as well. And so I, as far as I'm concerned, I had a theatrical experience watching it. But obviously, I appreciate not everyone is in that position.
Yeah. But you got to see it on the biggest screen you can, people. So try and make it an event. Because it deserves that. It's good quality. It's a good film. If you like your intelligent sci-fi, you're going to love it, basically, because it's not pretentious in any way either. With what it's trying to say. Technically, it had a 4K DI, it's an Ultra HD stream on Netflix, and also there is Dolby Vision or HDR to it. No Dolby Atmos, I have to say, unfortunately. But yes, if you watch it on an HDR display,
then you will also find that really plays into the design of the film and the photography and the effects, and it works really well, because there are some scenes where that's actually quite a vital part of the I guess the
narrative,
narrative and visual language of the film.
Yeah. Okay, so that's Annihilation. What do you score it at, Steve?
I'll give it 8 out of 10 as well. I thought that's
okay, so that's 3 of us giving it 8 out of 10. Right, so we need to move on because we're up against the clock yet again this week. So films coming out this Friday if people want to go to the cinema, Steve?
Yes, there's A Wrinkle in Time from Disney, based upon a children's book, which I'm not personally familiar with. It has a largely female cast, and I know it's very popular with young girls, so I guess it's going to be a successful film. It opened it last week in the States, actually. And actually ended up coming second to Black Panther, which is still taking a staggering amount of money, and it's neck and neck right now with The Last Jedi in terms of box office.
Really need to go and see it.
You do need to go and see it. Yes, it's definitely worth seeing. And yeah, I'm staggered at how successful that's been, that film. I mean, it's fast approaching. You know, the two most successful Marvel movies are the two Avengers films. It's getting pretty close to them. So it's been an incredible success. But Wrinkle in Time came out, as I say, in the States last week, and it's out this weekend in the UK. So the other film opening this weekend is Pacific Rim Uprising, so a sequel to Pacific Rim.
Are we sending Ed to review this one?
Are we bollocks? I'm not going anywhere near a cinema.
I can't believe it's been 5 years since Pacific Rim, for one thing. It's like, has it been that long already? And I'm not sure it was a film that was crying out for a sequel, because the film does end in a fairly complete way. And I'm surprised it got a sequel, because it was quite successful, but not that successful, and it wasn't cheap. I don't know. I mean, Ed, you've seen the trailers, I assume, and you're a fan of Pacific Rim, but I don't know if this really appeals to me.
I'm not beating a path to my local Cineworld.
No.
Or Odeon.
I liked Pacific Rim. I ain't seen this one. The trailer.
Pacific Rim was not a great film, but it had Del Toro's attention to detail.
Yeah.
Which saved it. This doesn't seem to have that.
It
hasn't got Del Toro directing it, has it?
No, it's just it's taken the cheap and easy bits and gone long on that. And do you know what? When it lurches onto Sky Movies in the fullness of time, hell, I might even buy it as a test disc, depending on how it turns out. But no, I'm not dragging my ass to the cinema to see it.
No, I don't.
Not least because I've got lots of television saved over to get through this weekend, because I'm well up against it. So no, it's just one of those things. It just doesn't. It manages to go long on the bits of the original that didn't work, or at least looks like it does, and possibly forego some of the bits of Pacific Rim that were genuinely interesting.
I was going to say, it does that thing where if you look at the returning cast from the previous film, everyone who most of the characters that survived the previous film are in this film, apart from Charlie Hunnam's character. And obviously, even Charlie Hunnam didn't want to do it, which is surprising. But John Boyega headlines it as the son of Idris Elba's character, but who makes absolutely no mention of having had a son. In fact, the whole point of Pacific Rim is that the Japanese girl is his adoptive daughter. So you'd think he hadn't had any children. So that's a weird one. Also, I don't know yet whether John Boyega can carry a film. He's been good in some of the things I've seen. He was great in The Force Awakens. He's very good in Detroit, but whether can carry a movie, I'm not so sure. And as you say, Ed, without Del Toro behind the camera, it doesn't have the artistry of Pacific Rim. It's just big monsters and robots smashing each other, which isn't, whilst that's an element of Pacific Rim, there was more to it than just that.
It had a nice character to it. It was one of those sci-fis that, yes, I know this is dumb, yes, it's silly, but it's enjoyable dumb and enjoyable silly, and it's got a bit of character to it.
I have said in the past that I would absolutely love there to be a proper heavy duty high production TV series about the period after the first kaiju attack in the first film, about working out how the hell to develop the things, and all of the countries putting stuff aside and deciding to build these outlandish. I would, if that was done properly, it would be absolutely superb. But I guess it's something that would be a bit of a risky thing to undertake. But so instead, we've got lowest common.
Yeah, lowest common. Ed, put your ideas down on a bit of paper and go and visit Netflix. I'm sure they'll give you a few million to do that.
And but as I say, we've just gone lowest common denominator, which obviously is far less risky. So we'll see where we go from there.
Yep. Right, okay, swiftly moving on to disc releases this week. So if we're still buying movies and watching them at home, Steve, on the disc format?
Yeah, well, if you still are, then you've got Daddy's Home 2, which is available on both Blu-ray and Ultra HD Blu-ray. Sequel, obviously, Daddy's Home, with Mark Wahlberg and Will Ferrell coming back as the two parents, plus their fathers, played by Mel Gibson and by John Lithgow. Reviews have been so-so, kind of humorous in places, but unnecessary. So I can't see that one being a big one to buy. Film that is interesting, though, and something I didn't know about, which is Film Stars Don't Die in Liverpool, which is a true story about Gloria Graham, who was an actress. She played the floozy in It's a Wonderful Life, if you don't know who Gloria Graham is. But anyway, she was a big star in the 40s and 50s. And then sort of her star waned somewhat for various reasons, which I'm not going to go into in this podcast, but her star waned somewhat. And she ended up playing small parts in films and doing a play. She was doing a play in Liverpool in the late 70s, and she ended up sort of meeting and falling in love with this young actor. It then develops that she has cancer. And so it's about those last few years of her life and relationship with this Liverpudlian actor, and spending time in Liverpool but wanting to stay there with him, and that's where she was planning to die. It's got Annette Bening playing Gloria Graham, and also Jamie Bell playing the young actor that she falls in love with, and then falls in love with her. And it's an interesting story that a true story that I was unaware of. So that's quite interesting. And also we've got, I don't think it's been on Blu-ray before in this country. I know it's been on Blu-ray in the States, but Logan's Run's got a release coming out this week on Blu-ray. One of my faves from when I was a kid. Obviously, if you watch it and think that was made the year before Star Wars, you understand what a quantum leap in effects Star Wars was, because the cities and that sort of stuff are quite obviously models, and the effects are pretty ropey. And then you look at Star Wars a year later, and it's like just in a different galaxy. I mean, no pun intended. So, but still a great film. I love the concept of having a debauched life until you're 30, then being killed in the fiery renewal of Carousel. Obviously, when I was 10, that was a brilliant idea. Thought 20 years of doing what the hell I like, and then I'll die at 30. When I got to 30, wasn't so keen on that concept, obviously. But it's got Michael York and Jenny Agutter, who I'll watch in anything, because back then she was so saucy. So Logan's Run, and also coming out on Criterion Blu-ray, The Age of Innocence, Martin Scorsese's film with Daniel Day-Lewis and Winona Ryder and Michelle Pfeiffer, that is really, really good as well. And apparently, as you'd expect from Criterion, a fantastic transfer.
Why have I now got images of you sitting in your new car watching Logan's Run on your sat-nav screen with a blanket over your lap?
Yeah, well, Jenny Agutter, I'm not going to lie, there's been a few times in some of her movies where I might have...
Oh, God.
Oh, no. Right, UHD Blu-ray announcements. There's some crackers in here. It's going to be a year where I spend quite a bit of money on UHD Blu-rays now.
May is shaping up to be a really expensive month.
May could bankrupt me.
Because we've already had announced for May Saving Private Ryan and Jurassic Park films, 2001, Gladiator, Braveheart. I mean, it's all coming out in May. And now we've got Die Hard, which looks like it's going to come out on 15th.
Best Christmas movie ever.
Yeah, coming out in the middle of summer. And also The Matrix, that's coming out 22nd of May.
No, this is just The Matrix, it's not the sequels.
Yeah, just the first film, apparently.
Which is the way it should be. Yeah.
Brand new scan of the 4K restoration of the camera negative, so it should look really good as well. I believe Dolby Atmos soundtrack and Dolby Vision as well. So this one could be an absolute stellar disc. Obviously, everyone who can remember, the Matrix DVD was the first DVD you had to have.
I bought my first DVD player the day I bought The Matrix on DVD. The day The Matrix came out on DVD, that was the day I said, right, Laserdisc has had it now, I'm going to buy a DVD player. Which was quite late in the game, because it was 2000 when that came out, because the film came out in 99.
Yeah.
So I was later to the DVD, because I didn't want to give up Laserdisc, basically. I thought, no. But that was the day I thought, right, this is it. That's the end for Laserdisc.
Yeah. So they're coming out. And in June, we've also got The Incredibles coming out on 4K disc, obviously to tie in with the release of The Incredibles 2. But yeah, so some really cracky titles coming out in May. It's going to be an expensive month.
Yeah, I think so. Right, so that's it for this week. We've got loads of things that we've passed on this week that will carry over to next week, so it'll be another feature-packed podcast again next week. But my thanks to Steve Withers.
Fortune favours the brave, dude.
Mark Hodgkinson.
Are you funning me, son?
I'm glad you're still here, Mark. And Ed Selley.
This conversation is over.
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, bookmark AVForums for latest reviews, news and videos, and of course, why not leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes, but only if you enjoyed the show. I'm Phil Hinton. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.